Hello, I am Bentham and welcome back to Factorio Railworld. In the previous episode we were on our way to Cape Kerbal when we got attacked by biters and they blew up our train. So the plan was that we would come up here and start working on rocket production, but unfortunately, because none of the items actually made it to the outpost except an entire cargo wagon full of steel, we will have to go straight back to the main base and resupply. But there's a little bit of work to do here first. We've had some trains all get stuck up here, which is part of the reason I came, and we basically need to get them unstuck by basically telling them to move forward an inch and work out that they have a path. I mean, it's partially because I could set up the signals better on these loops. I mean, usually you don't need to have signals on the like within the loop itself, but in this particular situation that would have actually fixed it. But yeah, it can also cause problems in other ways, and yeah, hopefully we won't have any more trouble with this. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to break the line. I'm going to break the lake loop. There's going to be a gap in it so that the trains no longer try and come around the north end and constantly get stuck and cause loads of production issues down in the rest of the factory. And at some point I will come along and put in passing points and things and make it so the system actually runs right. But for the moment it's just easier to do that. So quick check of the train map to make sure that there aren't any that are already making their way up or anything. As long as there's none that have gone past the midpoint, coming from the east, then there shouldn't be any trains that can get stuck now, so it all should be completely fine. And we should have no more trains just sat around in the north not doing anything. And yeah, so with like just before we go, we'll also put in some radars just so we can get a bit of scanning done, because I realise that we've not got any at the moment here, so we have no idea if there's a base that's set up just outside gun range or anything like that to cause a bunch of issues. And immediately when we set up one of the radars, we spot, I think, a new biter base that's sprung up, and it's quite close, a little bit too close for comfort, and definitely too close to live more than a few minutes, because of course we want revenge. We want to kill many biters in payment for the train that they blew up. And once we've got all these radars in place, I will go forth and do that. We'll just kill a bunch of them and then go home and come back and kill a bunch more of them. At some point I need to go on a huge rampage murdering billions of the things, but for the moment I will I'll settle for hundreds and that'll be fine. So this base here, I do a little bit of experimenting. I see what happens if I don't use any destroyer drones, and I can actually take out the base. It just involves a little bit of faffing about being chased by burning behemoth biters for a while, which is fun, but also a bit tedious at times. So we'll probably use like bots at least for dealing with that. But yeah, all you have to do is run in, set all the base on fire and run away, and then once the biters chasing you have clumped into a pile, you can just set them all on fire and they will slowly burn away. Nothing can stop burning once it's started unless it dies, except in the case of some trees which can just turn into burned trees, but you could maybe still count it as dying. It might be that the tree disappears and is replaced by a burnt tree, or something along those lines. I guess that would be in a certain way how it works. But yeah, we're in a ring of fire here, taking out a bunch of spitters and biters that have chased us out of one of the bases. And then I start deploying the bots because it was taking too long and that base was a little bit bigger than the others. So we'll just deploy like multiple dozens of them and just start charging in and brute forcing our way through instead. Just walking through our own flames, being absolutely terrifying. Not that it matters, the biters still run straight at us, but yeah, we can just blast straight through the middle of this and murder many biters. Maybe one biter per item that was in the train, because let's see, there were 4 trains, roughly 100 items per slot, 4 wagons, 100 items per slot, 40 slots. That's a lot of biters. We'll see if we can kill that many. I mean, we probably have in our time in this game. If we ever like launch a rocket, we'll be able to check our score there. I can't remember if you can like recheck the score later once you've done it the first time or not. I hope you can. That'd be nice. We can see how many trees we've burned as well and things like that. How many rocks we've smashed into in the car, so on and so forth. Anyway, clearing up a couple of bases up to the west as well. What I'm basically doing is making a circle of death around around Cape Kerbal. Anything within this circle gets killed, and hopefully that will mean that we don't have any trouble with biters in Cape Kerbal for a while. I mean, I've never actually attacked the place. Maybe they've attacked it once or something, but I don't think they come along here very often, but they do like to go near the rails, as it turns out. We'll have to go around the rails at some point and do a proper bit of clearing to make sure that there aren't any bases near the rails anymore, and any bases that could be in range of the rails for future colonizations and things like that. Anyway, as you may have noticed there, I had a little bit of a problem where I managed to turn myself into an item bomb. Basically, I forgot that the Mark II power armor gives you extra inventory slots now, and I have things in those extra inventory slots, and instead of swapping one armor for the other, like I usually do when I'm switching between the fast armor and the heavy armor, I took one of them off before putting the other one on, which meant for a short time I did not have enough inventory slots, and so everything in those slots was dumped onto the floor, but I hoovered it all up again and carried on, and hopefully I'll not make that mistake again, and especially hopefully I'll not make that mistake in the middle of a factory or anything like that, because it wasn't too bad being in the middle of the wilderness, because there wasn't anything it could get mixed up with, but if you do that in a factory, then that can cause all sorts of problems, just mixing in with all the random belts and things, getting delivered all over the factory. It's horrible. I've had that sort of thing happen many a time, and you still find random bits of items, like hours and hours later, at the end of random belts causing issues. But anyway, we are rebuilding the rocket train before we return to the main base. I'm putting back all of the cargo wagons and setting up all of the filters so that as soon as the train arrives it can be reloaded without any trouble. And it'll look to the main base like nothing ever happened. The train will turn up empty, we'll just pretend that we arrived at Cape Kerbal, set up some rocket production, and all is going well, and no one at the main base needs to know. Even though there isn't anyone at the main base. I think that's towns bleeding over again. Me imagining there being real people in these factories that I need to keep happy or whatever. There was someone who suggested recently having some sort of mod where you have actual people in like working on production. I guess you could make like a basic assembler that works sort of like a burner mining drill, in that it's not fueled, it doesn't use electricity, it uses some sort of item, but you could make it fish or something, I was thinking, so you're feeding the people fish, and they're making you the items, and they're an extremely slow version of an assembler, or something like that. Somebody make that mod, it'll probably be okay. I mean, you could not bother with the retexturing and just make it so that it has a fuel slot that only takes fish, or something. Anyway, we are now taking the train back to the main base. We've got it all set up with its filter slots and so on, and we'll send it straight back to the station to be reloaded immediately. And it shouldn't take too long for it to be ready to go again, but I think I might leave it a while before I go back anyway, do a bit of work on the factory, take my mind off the horrors that took place in the north of the lake, and go back when I've got when I'm a little bit refreshed and ready to try that again. I mean, we now know that the tracks are clear. They might not stay clear for very long. I mean, there are still some bases that are very near to the tracks, so maybe we shouldn't leave it too long, because then we might just have the same thing happen again. But yeah, I'd like a second engine to this on the back or something for some extra pushing power and things like that, so that if we do crash into a base in future, we might actually be able to push through it. And like when we actually did that. Yeah, some people asked me why I didn't like deploy bots while I was in the train, and someone else in the comments answered it very well. Basically, I was just I was panicked. I didn't have time to think of that sort of thing, and all I could think was I need to get out of this, keep pushing, it seems to be working a bit, maybe if we keep trying we'll escape, and I just didn't think to deploy bots. Part of me didn't think that the train would get broken. For a short time, everything was sort of in equilibrium and it was all fine. And then the biters changed their tactic and attacked one of the cargo wagons instead of the actual engine, and it all went horribly wrong from there. So yeah, I could have handled that better, but I didn't. And I'm not going to reload the save and do it better, because that would just be cheating, basically. We must be responsible for our mistakes, and we also need to kill all the biters for what they did. Anyway, back at the main base, everything's going okay, except for the power failures, which are just the norm, really. Even though we just upgraded the power production, it's still not good enough, so everything did shut down from the huge boost in power consumption from the train arriving in the base. Loads of different assemblers kicked in, loads and loads of bots running around, loading the train, unloading me, and giving me various items that I'd been using up while I was away. Including 100 new destroyer drones. I used up my entire supply of destroyer drones on that mini rampage in the north. plus when I was defending the train, or failing to anyway. But yeah, that's all sorted. The train is already nearly fully loaded. I've done a little bit of tweaking so that next time round it should be loaded in like 30 seconds, and then be able to set off again, which will be awesome. Though that's not accounting for the factory not being able to keep up with the supply demands of the train. But we went over to the oil outpost and everything looks okay at the moment, but then that's because the train isn't running like regularly yet. We sat in the Megacopper base for ages not doing anything, so I imagine that it'll get worse. And once the train is actually running constantly between Cape Kerbal and the main base, we will start blasting through our oil supplies quite rapidly. So we will need to set up some new oil pumping and so on around the place. We'll work that out in future. In the meantime, I've noticed that there's a little bit of trouble with the copper supply. The trains that deliver copper seem to be using up, well, they seem to be getting fully emptied on arrival, which is a sign that there's not enough copper production anymore for the consumption. So before it gets too much of a problem, we'll make our way over to Megacopper and fix things up. And this can be our nice vacation. This can be our rest and distraction from the annoyance of losing that train, losing hours and hours of work, so on and so forth. Let's not dwell on it. Let's focus on what is in front of us. And what is in front of us is quite good, actually. We have nearly, after a stupidly long amount of time, managed to cut a complete clear path through the middle of the Megacopper deposit. There's just 7 miners left, though I upgrade that to 9 so we can get things mined a little bit quicker. But once this last little bit of copper here is cleared away, we can finally set up the tracks how we always intended to. Like, when I was coming through here originally building the Lake Railway, I already had the plan for this, that the lines would run straight through the middle of the deposit, and the loop would be on the east side of it, and then on the west side of it there would just be stations, and there would be multiple stations, because we would need multiple for all the loading that would be required. I mean, stack inserters and things like that have helped to improve the loading rate and things, but really we need multiple stations, because at the moment the trains are constantly queuing. There's always one waiting for another one to finish being loaded, and so we could speed things up if we get another separate station running, so that we can load 2 at once. And we also need a waiting area, because at the moment, whenever a train is waiting for another one to be loaded with copper here, it blocks any trains trying to get from the main base to the midpoint outpost from passing, because there's not enough room in the track. So we need a proper waiting area so the trains can be out of the way of the main lines and other trains can continue to go past as normal. And basically we need to upgrade this to a proper station. This is all... It's all been temporary, even though this is like, I wouldn't be surprised if all this stuff has been around for more than a year at this point. It's been like 50 episodes or something stupid. And yeah, it's just like, it's all been temporary since the beginning, and I've just been waiting to cut through the middle of this deposit with miners so I could finally upgrade it properly. So we are finally approaching that stage. The last little bits of stuff are being mined, and I'm just like... faffing about. Well, not exactly, because like the reason that I came here was because of the copper supply being low. So what I'm doing is adding in some more miners and things to help with the supply and so on. But at the moment, the reason I'm doing it is because I'm waiting for the miners in the middle to be finished so we can finally put the tracks in. And I decide that I will not leave until it's done, and I'll boost it with speed modules if necessary to get the work finished. So we've added in some more rows of miners to help with the situation, and the belts are looking good at the moment, but when I add in a second blue belt to help increase the loading rate at the end of the station, suddenly the supply goes rubbish again. I mean, it's not gone down, but now suddenly we're burning through it much quicker than before, and it shows that there is still room for improvements. This, like, the limiting factor was the rate at which it was being delivered at the other end, because we had this weird system of 1 blue belt and 2 yellow belts, which is partially because I didn't have enough blue belts when I originally set it up, so I couldn't get it so that it was all blue belts. So I think that is enough to fill 2 blue belts. Maybe I'm wrong. It might be that you can do slightly more. It might be that a blue belt is 2.5 times the speed of a yellow belt, but either way, adding in a second blue belt has shown that we can run quicker. And like, even with the loading system we currently have, I mean, what I want to do is upgrade it so there are 2 loading systems for the 2 separate stations that will be able to operate in tandem. So we definitely need more. We'll probably just start putting miners on this whole deposit. And the power system can take it. I checked the power system earlier, and as it turns out, I massively overestimated the amount of power that this base would require when I originally set up the solar panels and accumulators, so there's still plenty of power production left. But anyway, I've decided I've lost patience with this, and I've just dumped a bunch of speed modules into the miners, and immediately that's like 50% extra power consumption, because like with all the efficiency modules we have, everything's super efficient here. And so previously, things where like all the miners was using 20% of their normal amount of power, and then each one of these is using something like 300% of its normal amount of power, if not more. And yeah, like they're really blasting through now. They're mining at, I believe, 250% of their normal rate, or is it? Yeah, I think it's 250%. So we should get through this pretty quickly. I mean, there's only a tiny bit left at this point, and very quickly we're burning through it. But I'm basically just standing around waiting for this to be done. I mean, I can do some like messing about with the belts to make them more efficient. There's a lot of belt spaghetti going on at the moment on the area where we merge all the lines from the different columns into the 3 belts that go over to the loading, and it's because like I just keep adding bits to it without actually like overhauling anything. I never get rid of any old bits. I just keep bolting more belts onto the side. Even now I'm doing it and just making it more and more awkward and completely unnecessarily awkward. But in a moment we will fix it properly when we'll get the belts completely overhauled. I'm just sort of waiting because I want the middle mining to be finally done so we can sort that out. And I think it's nearly done. There are now 2 miners left, and they've just got like 18 copper left, or some random number like that. So I take out the speed modules. We don't really need that anymore, because I do still have some work to do with the tracks. And with that about to be done, I know I can fill in the tracks in a moment. In fact, I think I already can do, because it was the bottom miners specifically that were blocking it. So what I do is I cut off the rails on either end so that I can put in the proper loop. And this is the loop that was always supposed to be in place. It was supposed to be on this end of the deposit, so there was plenty of room on the other end for all of the station space that we might want. So we're now putting that in. As it turns out, I've got the belt slightly awkward here. I realised that the spacing between the diagonal belts is actually not quite right for it to be symmetrical, which doesn't matter that much, but we want to get this right after waiting for so long to put this all in place. So we shift everything along by a little bit, and then everything lines up nicely, and we'll just move this belt over slightly. And we'll extend this passing point as well, because we like originally when I set this up, there were only trains with 1 engine and 2 wagons coming along here. Nowadays we have ones with 4 wagons that come along fairly frequently, and of course we have the mega train with the 10 wagons and things like that. So extending it probably makes a bit of sense in making sure we don't have any like issues with trains getting stuck and so on. So we extend that along, put that in place, get the signals in, and then we just need to go to the other end and reconnect the lines, and the trains can start running again. And then from there we can start actually putting in the new stations and getting it so that we can have Megacopper running at the speed it was always meant to run at, loading multiple trains at once, and hopefully having the mining capacity to do that. That is also a bit of a challenge we'll have. We'll probably have to put miners on the whole deposit for that sort of thing, but that'll be quite cool. And it should mean that we don't have any copper problems for a good long while, until we finally need a new copper outpost, and I'll see if I can find a Megacopper 2 when the time comes. I'm sure there's one somewhere around the lake, though I'm not sure if there's one quite as big as this one. But anyway, the lines are now in place again, the trains are able to start running again, and we can work through the slight traffic jam that we ended up with here. But immediately it's all running fine. It does mean the trains take a little bit more time to turn around, but that really doesn't matter that much. I mean, in a moment we're going to be upgrading it so that they can be loaded much sooner, so that should more than balance that out, I would say. But anyway, that's all the trains. Done everything back to normal running, and I just do a bit of messing about with the belts. And yeah, it's time we cleared away this stupid mess of belts here, so I just get the destroyer drones. Not the destroyer drones, well, might as well. I get the construction drones, the opposite, I guess, to just take the whole thing apart, and then we'll just rebuild it in a much more simple way. There we go, 3 belts, and then there's 1 fourth one. We'll merge that in with a splitter. And yeah, that's much nicer. That was all we needed. I had such stupid systems in place before, and it was all really unnecessary. So there we go, everything's being nicely split between the belts. There's still 1 yellow belt left, which is of course completely full. The other ones are not full, but we'll continue to add in more miners, and that should help with that. Also, I've ended up with so much like random copper in my inventory, I just make a new chest to unload that onto the belts to like introduce it in a more convenient way. And that actually does help quite a bit. The belts are looking very full, but of course soon we will need a lot more. But anyway, we start setting up the new bit of siding here for the extra bit of station, and we don't have any more time for anything else for that today. So we'll work out exactly how we're going to set it up in the next episode. I imagine we'll have to get rid of the blue belts we have at the moment, because the loading area is going to be shifting. But anyway, that's all we have time for today, so I shall say goodbye. Thank you for watching, and I shall see you next time.